Hi there, and welcome to the latest edition of Cool People. Over the last 2 years since coming out as transgender and doing lots of trans awareness training, public speaking and media appearances, I've met all sorts of amazing people with incredible stories to tell and made all sorts of new friends. And with me today is no exception. In fact, I'm very honoured to have Kellie Maloney with me today. Now, Kellie is a radio presenter and public speaker, but she's most famous for being a former boxing promoter of the undisputed world heavyweight champion, Lennox. So I'm so pleased and honoured that you've agreed to do this. So welcome, Kellie.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's a nice break from being locked down in boredom, not seeing anyone. My life at this present moment is totally social media.
Yeah, me too.
Group talks, quizzes, everything. Interviews for podcasts and stuff like that. So we're at a very strange time in the human race history, I believe. I'm not sure our lives will ever be the same again once this lockdown is lifted, because every country is different. It's strange, and it makes me go back to thinking of when I was transitioning, about the isolation that I had then, because obviously as you transition, you're frightened or when you're living a double life, which I was doing for quite a while, you're frightened to go out into the street. You think to yourself, is this going to be my life forever?
Yeah.
And that was an isolation that was forced on yourself. So I wouldn't say it's a choice that you subconsciously made, where this is a choice where we're being forced to do it. So it's quite interesting, because it's and to compare the two of them is quite good, because I remember sitting in my house when I transitioned. I moved around a bit because of the press following me, and because I never wanted to get too comfortable in one area. And I used to remember sitting in my house dreading people knocking on the door. Now I'm sitting in my house wishing someone to knock on the door.
Yeah. Well, at least at least you're in a nice place.
Yeah, I've got, this is I had another house in Portugal before I moved. I've only been in this one just over a year this month, actually, a year in May. And I've jumped from, I never run my story in a chronological order. I jump all over the place.
Okay.
I mean, October last year, I had a beautiful villa on top. I had it for 20 years. I bought it in the early days when Lennox won his first world title, and I got a nice payday. And I thought, what can I do? And I always wanted to have a house in Europe somewhere where I could just jump on a plane, get away, and escape. So my partner and I bought this lovely villa on top of a hill in Portugal, and it was my escape place during my transition as well. I used to come here, lock the gates. No one could ever come in. So I was very comfortable. And it was actually the first place I ever went shopping as Kellie, and bought other than online, went into a shop and done shopping for clothes that and I wasn't pretending to be buying clothes for my daughters or my partners like you do when you're living that double life.
I remember it well.
Yeah, and I had a bit of an accident there, October 2018. I met someone in Portugal, an English person in Portugal, in a bar one night, and we got chatting and talking, and this friendship went on for about 8-9 months, maybe a bit longer, but it was a very mixed friendship, and both of us were giving out the wrong messages to each other, and we sort of got involved in not in a sexual way, in a platonic way, but it could have led to a sexual way.
Okay.
But it never quite did, because this person could never come to terms with I was a female, and obviously they were a female, but they knew all about the other person I used to be.
Okay.
And in their own way, they used to, and we used to spend nights together, sitting, chatting, talking, drinking, and going out for meals. And and if I'm honest, I sort of really fell for this person. And the messages that they gave back to me were that they were trying, and we were trying to get this relationship to work, but obviously the fear of this person having a relationship with someone of the same sex was too much for her, because she was a mother, and her parents were very old and traditional, and didn't sort of understand anything. And her father knew Frank Maloney and talked about it. And I remember, she would say, if only you were Frank, we could have a great relationship. And it's played heavily on my mind.
Not the basis of a good relationship, is it? No.
And it got serious without any intimacy in the relationship.
Yeah.
And then one time, I don't know what happened. Something happened, and I was back home doing a talk for the NHS on attempt on suicide. And I think I was due to fly back to Portugal just after my speech, and I don't know what happened. We had a bit of a row on the telephone, and I started drinking at the airport, which I normally never do. I got back to Portugal. I phoned this person, and they never picked up the phone. They wouldn't respond to my calls. And I kept drinking when I got off the plane, and I drank quite heavy that night. And I had a friend staying with me at the villa, thank heavens. And when I got back I was in quite a state, and my friend and I went out to eat, who was staying with me. And the friend who was staying with me actually was my former counsellor. She'd become such a great friend to me and an ally to me. And she had to stop counselling me because obviously she crossed that ball of professionalism. She'd become more of a family friend, but she's also retired as a counsellor now, so it doesn't. But I still have her on my telephone on speed dial if I actually need to phone her and talk to her. But we talk as a friend, but her advice is very valuable to me.
Cool.
And besides, she found me another counsellor who's also on my speed dial. So we went out and we were chatting and talking. And when we got back to the villa, and she said, "Are you going to tell me, Kelly, what's wrong?" And I went, "There's nothing wrong. I've just had a bad day. The speech in London didn't go as well as it should have gone. I put all the blame onto that." And I went to bed, and she went to bed, and I got up during that night, and I just took as many pills as I could find, back into my bedroom with a bottle of wine. And I really went hell for leather on it, and I recorded a couple of videos to have sent to my daughters, telling them I was sorry and everything else. And thankfully, I don't know what happened, but early hours of the morning, the thing I know is I woke up chained to a bed in a hospital in Faro, and I was put into a psychiatric hospital here in Portugal, which is not a nice place to be. That's what I can remember. But what I'm told is that about 2 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. in the morning, my friend heard someone glass breaking on the floor, and it was me. I'd gone to the fridge to get another bottle of wine because I'd drunk bottle and a half already, and where I tried to open it, it must have fallen, and I passed out. Thank heavens. Anyway, she eventually, and my villa was in the middle of nowhere, and eventually she got hold of she got my phone and used my finger to open my phone. And sounds like a spy movie, doesn't it? And she phoned a friend of mine, an old Portuguese friend of mine, and said, "Kelly's had a terrible accident. She's just passed out," wouldn't say what it was. And he was able to guide the ambulance to where I lived because she had no idea. And, my dogs were like jumping all over me and licking me, and she was trying to keep the dogs off me. And they couldn't take me out on a stretcher because of where I lived. They had to take me out on a special chair, I believe. Anyway, they got me to the hospital, and the next thing I woke up in this hospital the next day totally, and my daughter was standing there at my bedside, and she obviously got the first plane out that morning, and she was there. And it was my eldest daughter Emma, who some people might have heard of her in my transitioning because she's been my rock. And again, she talked me again around saying, "Dad, why have you done this?" I didn't know she saw the videos, and that she deleted them. And she said, I would never have sent those videos to my sisters. I would never want them to know why this happened. She said, this is not you. We need our dad in our lives. You've always been there. You've always been that rock, even through what you've been through. We've talked about this before. We prefer our dad dressed in a wooden box, and it's a saying she uses a lot when she wants to shock me back into reality. Because I do suffer with a black cloud over my head, and every so often this black cloud descends, and it's as if I enter this tunnel, and I go in this tunnel hoping I'm going to see light at the other end. But I have learnt now to find the way out of the tunnel, where up until that point I couldn't find a way out of the tunnel, and and I'll be honest, it was the third attempt at suicide, and it was probably the most dramatic attempt of all my, because I wanted to die so badly that night. I honestly did. And as I say now, when that tunnel, when I feel that cloud coming down on me, I now go onto the speed dial, which has my daughters on it and has my counsellors on it, the counsellor and my friend. And I talk, because that was the one thing I was very bad at doing. As Frank Maloney, I could talk the hind legs of a donkey. As Kellie, I was very much more a private person. I was frightened to tell people my feelings. I was frightened to share my moments of anxiety and sadness with anybody, because I felt that I brought this upon myself, and that it was something I had to suffer and not endure to anyone else. But thankfully, my daughters do want me to share it with them, and as I say, Jan found me this counsellor, and she's very good.
Good.
So, and I feel now that when this cloud does descend on me, I phone someone and I'll just talk nonsense or just talk about it to them, and it does help me. So obviously, when I finally got out of the hospital, and I was only in there for 48 hours, thank heavens, because my daughter voluntarily agreed to let me go in, and that meant I could leave any time, and it was the most frightening thing I'd ever been through.
So when was this?
This was 2018.
It was 2018, yeah. So,
it was the 9th October in 2018. And to see these people, I mean, I don't know what psychiatric hospitals are like in England, but when I see them on films, they're certainly a lot better than where I was like an old Victorian building that you would not want paint falling off the wall, just people, plenty of staff, but everyone was so doped up, just walking about. It was like a land of that film, The Walking Dead.
Oh dear.
It was like that, and you've got to remember, no one spoke English, and I don't speak Portuguese, even though I've had a house there for over 20 years. So you can imagine, and it was terrifying. Even though I was doped up, I wasn't as heavy medication as some of the people in there, the poor people in there. And eventually I was let out once my daughter agreed that I would have 24-hour care, and I would go back and see the psychiatrist on her, which I agreed to. The psychiatrist could speak good English, and I was living on these pills for ages. I was actually a zombie in I spent most time sleeping. That's what these tablets they were giving me were doing to me. And obviously I wanted to come back to the UK, but my dogs always travel with me. I have 4 dogs and they travel with me. And the only way I could get back to the UK was by driving. But I couldn't drive while I was on these tablets because I wasn't allowed to drive. So, I kicked the tablets for 3 weeks. I did not take another tablet. And it was a real hard trying to get to sleep, remembering what I'd nearly done to myself. And eventually I was strong enough to drive back. A friend of mine flew out from the UK to drive back with me, and we drove back, and that sort of, you know. But just after Christmas, I came back to Portugal, to the house, and I walked into it, and I could see myself laying on the floor, and it kept playing back. So I had to sell the house because I could no longer because it was a house that had happiness in it, because it was our family home in Portugal. But in separation from my partner, I kept the house in Portugal, and she kept the UK house. And it was a very sad moment that I had to sell the house, and I looked for another, and I found this lovely place up in the middle of nowhere again, but with a lot of land. And to me, this is my total heaven, because it's got no bad memories in it. It's got no bad vibes in it. It's only got people in it that I want in it. My daughters come to it. My ex-partners comes here. So it changed my life, and it really helped me, and I made some good friends. I mean, only a certain amount of people, well, everyone knows what happened, because eventually, I talked about my story on Loose Women, but it took me nearly 18 months before I could even talk about it. And I only talked about it after talking with my counsellor. She said, Kelly, it might be good for you to open up about your story now, and it may help other people.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
When I did get quite a lot of messages from people, and then when that poor TV personality killed herself, Caroline Flack,
that's tragic.
It brought it all back to me, and it made me realise, do you know what? It doesn't matter who you are or what you are. If you enter that tunnel, or you enter that place of darkness, unless you've got the right people there to get you out of it, you're not coming out of it.
No.
Because, the mind is a terrible thing. I can't explain it. I mean, I feel I've transitioned 3 times in my life. Once, when I was born, I was Frank. So I learned how to be a male, and I grew up being a male. And obviously throughout that journey, I knew that wasn't the real me. Eventually, Kelly emerged, and Kelly was never really, what's the word I'm looking for? Kelly wasn't the comfortable Kelly that's sitting here now and talking. It wasn't until that incident in October when I really realised what I was doing, and I felt that I've been reborn since then, and I'm now.
That's interesting.
I think I'm into my 3rd generation, my 3rd lifestyle.
Yeah.
Wow. Even though at certain points I was very happy from the minute I transitioned, and my story became public in August 2014. And I didn't have to hide myself away from the world. It was like, it was just like being let out of prison after serving I don't know how many years.
It's a big relief, isn't it?
It is. It is. When you go through life hiding, first you go through life lying to yourself because you're living in the wrong body, and you've created this world and this lifestyle that is not alien to you, because that's wrong. Because, I was honestly, truly in a very happy marriage until I took the lid off the Pandora box. I had 2 beautiful children with my partner, and I also had my older daughter from my first partner. So I had everything on paper. I had the perfect life. I had the life of a pop star, or a celebrity, if you want to say it, because of who I was, and because of managing the world heavyweight champion. The respect I had was unbelievable from different walks of life. Different, my daughters grew up on that, on the reputation of their dad being that tough South London gangster. Not that I was a gangster, but that's the image everyone. That was the image everyone had of boxing promoters. I remember when I first met Tracy, and she told her aunt about me, because her aunt was very close to Tracy because her mother died when she was young.
Mm.
Her aunt went, he's a gangster. Why would you want him in your life, you know? And I had to go and meet her aunt. And when her aunt met me, she realised, she went, I'm so sorry. She said, she said, but it's the image that your business creates, she said.
It does, doesn't it?
She said, that man in America with the funny white hair. She meant Don King. You know, and I went, yes, I know. I said, but you can't always judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, and I think to myself, God, she died, obviously, Peggy, she was a lovely lady.
Yeah.
And I honestly think, now, if she was alive, how can I can, like that saying, you can't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
How true is that about me?
Too right.
Because I was a different book.
Yeah.
When she met me, you know. So
Wow.
I don't know. It's so hard to explain about this journey because I never wanted to give in to this. You know,
No.
I never ever in my life wanted. I would have taken any pill to stay as Frank Maloney because I had everything I wanted.
You
know,
did. You had so much to lose, didn't you? I mean, amazing.
Yeah, but what I didn't have was inner happiness and contentment.
Yeah.
I didn't have that inner peace in myself. You know, people saw the person that was flash, Jack the lad, had a reputation of shooting from the mouth without thinking. The mouth went into gear before the brain went into gear. And I would just say whatever came out of my and consequences. I never thought about consequences. I never thought about who I hurt. I never thought about consequences. I never, as long as I could keep my name in the press, because that's what boxing promoters do, and I could keep my profile up, so all the fighters would come and sign with my stable because it's a very cutthroat business. Yeah, you know, it's a pond. It's a small pond, but all the main players now are sharks, and you become a shark or you get eaten alive. And I became a shark, maybe a baby shark compared to some of them, but I was a shark. But no one saw the person, as I was saying, that would go away from all that, would open a bottle of wine or vodka or whatever they wanted to drink, sit in a hotel room and cry, and you know, not be at peace with themselves, and then have to hide it from the woman that you loved and that was part of your life. You were lying to her. Yeah. In some ways, you were envious of her because you'd watch her get dressed, looking nice, and you'd think to yourself, that could be me. Why is that not me?
I know. So many times, the same things happen to me so many times. You do, and you know. Yeah.
It's strange. And you look in the mirror and the person looking back at you is not you. I used to look in the mirror and just think, who the F could I kill today? Whose life could I mess up? In business wise, that was, I mean, not in, you know, not, and that was the attitude I had. And then when I was able to, you know, when I was finally able to face it, when my father passed away in 2009, I was able to face it, and I came to terms with it, and I eventually told Tracy, and I knew as it was coming out of my mouth that my marriage was over. I actually wanted to catch the words and push them back down my throat and choke myself, but it was too late. And I remember having counselling because I opened up to my counsellor before this, and I used my counsellor to try and keep myself on the straight and narrow. But she told me, the day you take the lid off the Pandora box, you will never put the lid back on it. No. And that night I told Tracy was the night I lifted the lid on my Pandora box.
Yeah. The genie won't go back in the bottle, will it?
No. As you know, I've always explained that throughout my life up until that point, I thought there was two people living in one person's body. There was Frank Maloney on this shoulder, and there was Kelly on this shoulder. Yeah. And they would constantly be battling with each other. And most of the time, because of being busy in boxing, because I never had time to think about it, and I did love what I'd done. Yeah. I loved, and I was passionate about it because it was something that really kept me sane throughout.
You were very successful, let's face it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I managed 5 world champions, and
Mm.
I was Britain's leading promoter.
Mm.
I had multi-million-pound TV contracts, and I had to start a great team of staff around me, and I enjoyed the boxing. I enjoyed building young people's career.
Mm.
And Frank was winning the battle, and I really thought he would win it
Mm.
until the day my father died.
Mm.
And that was a day when I could no longer pretend to be Frank Maloney anymore.
Mm.
And I looked in that mirror, and as I said, that night when I opened up, I knew my life would change forever that moment, and it did. And I slowly.
Yeah. Do you think that was because if you were thinking about doing it before, you were held back because you didn't want to bring shame on your dad, or that he wouldn't get it, or
My dad? Well, my dad had so much respect. I had so much respect for my dad.
Yeah.
My dad had me on a pedestal.
Right.
Yeah, I was a 15-year-old boy that walked out of school without any qualifications, and as I walked out of school, because I just could not get into school. I was very dyslexic, and found it hard to read and write. I think that's why I talk so much, because God gifted me with a great tongue instead of a brain. And
don't put yourself down.
And the love and respect I had for my dad, because he encouraged me all the time to achieve and go after my dream, and I felt I could never let him down, because I was the oldest of the family, and I never wanted to. And I remember the day my dad was dying, to this day, in May 2009. Eventually, all 3 of us were around his bed, and he's looked, and my dad was a very active man, but his body gave out because of the cancer, but his brain was so alert, and he was still alert on that. And he was laying, and he said, "Look, boys, I can no longer live this lifestyle. I've got no quality of life." And my dad was quite religious for the sort of man he was. He went, "I just want God to take me now. I'm ready to go and meet my maker." And I took my dad's hands, and I really wanted to tell him there and then.
Wow.
And I turned around and I went, "Dad, I have something to tell you." And he sort of turned his head, and his eyes just looked at me, and he smiled, and he went, "What is it, my son?" And I went, "I love you, Dad." I could not tell him.
Oh.
And I walked out of that house sort of crying.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
And I knew that would be the last time I would see my dad. And I got a phone call the next morning from my other brother to tell me that Dad had died during the night.
Oh.
And I could never go back and see my dad again, because I'm not very good with that situation. I never went to see my dad in the Undertakers when he was there, where my brothers did. I couldn't go. And yeah, that was.
But
that was really.
At least you got to tell him that you loved him.
Yeah. And I still think today, he may be looking down on me, and I hope he's as proud of me today as he was when I was Frank, because
I'm sure he is.
It was a very, very strange situation. And I felt, and it was just then when my whole life started to change. I took myself away from the world. Started living totally different sort of life. I remember 2013 when I done my last boxing show, and I decided after that show that I could no longer do this business as well, and I had to be very honest. Again, it was a very strange situation. I had to eventually tell my family, because the only person who knew was my ex-partner, and that's why I have so much respect for her, and probably still in love with her. Well, I am, and we are very close friends. We talk regular. We meet for coffee. She'll come to the house in Portugal for a holiday if she wants with the girls, and we go out together still with the girls. which is quite, and she'll phone me in this isolation situation to make sure I'm all right. And she did help. She did help my two younger daughters understand the situation and understand what I was going through. And for that, I'm truly grateful to her and have the utmost respect for her. Because I've heard of some of my trans friends that I met on my journey at my support groups and throughout other things. And I've heard the stories of how their family have turned against them, and their wife won't talk to them, won't let them see the children. And that must be terrible, because, I never chose this life. You never chose this life. None of us chose this life or this journey.
No.
It was something that
it chooses you, doesn't it?
It does. I do a lot of public speaking, and you can always tell if they're interested, or the people who are not interested in your conversation, who look at you as if you're some kind of weirdo or freak. And I have this great tuition of tuning into them, and I sort of turn and I always look at them and I go, you obviously think there's something wrong with me, and you can see them, and I go, I don't really. You're entitled to your opinion, I said, and I understand if you don't understand it, but there is no need to be rude. There is no need to reject me, because I'm a human being the same as you. And there, for the grace of God, you could be standing where I'm standing, and I could be sitting where you're sitting. But if I was sitting where you were sitting, I wouldn't be as ignorant as you are. And it quite works. Sometimes I have been told off that I'm a bit rude and a bit over the top with it, but I think it's the only way to make people understand.
Do you get much of that? Do you get much of that in public speaking?
I get a lot of. No, I don't get a lot of the. I don't get a lot of the that now.
No.
I've been very lucky, and I don't know if it's because of the world I can't. But you always get the odd person who's sniggering behind their hand or someone. You can always see it in the room. I tell you where I sometimes get it, when I'm talking at schools where younger kids are, where they've been influenced by their parents.
Right. Yeah.
Because if you really believe this, no child is born prejudiced.
Nope. They're taught it, aren't they?
Homophobic. Nope. Or they don't even know what hatred is. No. It's what's installed in them as they grow up. You are a product of your society.
Yep.
And that is something I also use in my speak. When you look at, you can tell people, and you can say, do you know what, your children will be fine because of the way you are. And I'm very lucky, because even though I made comments about the gay community, which I should never have made when I was involved with our friend Nigel Farage in UKIP, and I made these comments more out of gesture than anything else, but I realised how hurtful his comments was. And my girls always, my girls went, how can you be a transgender person when some of the things you said about the LGBT world? And I went, look, I said those I don't know why I said those. They're things I regret, and they're things that will always follow me, because unfortunately the internet now, if you wear two odd socks and it gets on the internet, for the rest of your life you'll be known as the person who wore odd socks.
Yeah, it comes back to haunt you. Yeah.
It does. The internet's changed the way people think, and I often read the lunatics and the anti-trans brigade and the feminists who attack us about some of the comments I've made in the past, and some people from the LGBT community who may not agree with what I believe, because I am from the trans community that believe the T should be separate to the LGB. And the reason I say, I don't say we should isolate ourselves. We should work and help and support each other, and we can learn from the LGB community. But and I think this is where sometimes in the world we all get confused and mixed up. The LGB is about your sexuality.
Yeah. The
T is purely about one's gender. And until you decide your sexual partner, you are neither, in my case, a heterosexual female or a lesbian, because I have not decided on who I want to have a relationship with.
Okay.
So I think that's where the separation should be.
Mm.
I would like to see LGB and T if we are. And I know there is a movement in the trans community who think similar to me, and because
I can see where you're coming from in that gender is completely separate from sexuality, and so many people get the two mixed up, and it's something that I'm always having to explain when I do my speeches and my transwenics training. I always having to do that.
And that's right.
But at the same time, I think there still are a lot of similarities in that, we're an oppressed minority basically, and so we sort of support each other.
And that's what I'm saying.
And so,
but that's what I'm.
Yeah.
Sorry, and that's what I'm saying. By we can learn from the LGBT.
Yeah.
We can work with them, and we can support each other.
Yeah.
But the groups should be slightly separated so people understand this. One of the things I say in my speeches is, my sexuality is who I go to bed with. Sorry, my sexuality is who I wake up next to. My gender is who I go to bed as. And so far, I've woken up next to my dog and my teddy bear. So what does that make my sexuality? And people do then get that. They do realise that.
Absolutely, yeah. Who you are has nothing to do with who you're attracted to. Yeah, I mean, for me, what's happened is the labels changed. So I've always been attracted to women, and I'm still attracted to women. So previously I was labelled as a heterosexual man. Now I'm labelled as a lesbian. Well, I haven't chosen the labels, and I'm completely comfortable, and it feels completely natural, and it's just how it is. But it's just a change of label.
And I totally agree with that. I'm not a great believer in labels. I don't think we should be labelled, because at the end of the day, we're all members of the human race. You don't see heterosexual people walking around with badges on saying they're heterosexual. You don't. So why do we need to what does it matter to anyone if I'm a lesbian, if I'm a heterosexual female, if I'm a male or a female? If I'm good at what I do, that's all that should matter. If I'm the right person for that job, that's all that should matter.
Yeah.
I should not be judged on my gender or my sexuality or my religion or my nationality.
No, absolutely not. You should just be accepted for who you are. Yeah, absolutely.
It's about being accepted. It's not also about being accepted. It's about respect. I'm a great believer that I may not agree with what you've done, but I respect you as a fellow human being, and all I ask is that you respect me. I know there's a lot of people that don't understand what I've been through. There's a number of friends that I've lost, that I thought would never have deserted me no matter what, yet they can't handle what I've been through.
Yeah.
Now, I don't hold that against them, but all I ask them to do is show me respect. That to me, that is the most important word, respect, in the human world. The word respect. If you don't respect another human being, you don't respect anyone.
No, absolutely.
And that is, for me, that is so important.
Absolutely.
I don't care if you think that what I've done is not normal or natural. You haven't been through what I've been through. You will never understand. You probably will never understand what I've been through.
No. And gender dysphoria is such a powerful feeling. It's all consuming, isn't it?
Yeah, but all I ask is that you respect me as a fellow human being, and that's all I want.
Yeah.
I mean, if I choose a partner, and be it a woman, then yes, I'm a member of the LGBT community and the LGB, and I will support them, which I do support them, and I speak up for them. Even if I fell in love with a man, I would still support fellow LGBT people, because they're human beings. And as you said earlier, we all have a right to live. We all have a right to live our life. As long as you live by the laws of the land, or if you're religious, by the 10 Commandments, you can't be anything else. And that's the sort of respect people should have for you. And these are the messages I try to get across when I do my public speaking. It's not about I'm not going to. Do you look at someone different because they've got an arm missing? Do you look at someone different because they've got a leg missing? No, you treat them as if they're a human being. So why don't you treat someone who's had gender dysphoria as you? Because to me, again, I'm a little bit different. I actually think it is a medical thing. I know people say it's nothing, it's not medical, but it is medical, because if it wasn't medical, why do we need doctors to rectify it and to change us? So, we all have, none of us are ever going to agree on what gender dysphoria is, other than we know we're in the wrong body.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't think it's a mental problem. I know, and I'm great that it's been moved, that most countries have moved it out of the mental health.
Absolutely. Well, it's been declassified now, because it used to be classified as a mental illness by the World Health Organization, but they actually declassified it last year. But then again, they used to classify being homosexual as being a mental illness, and now that's unthinkable. So it's the same sort of thing, but they've just been much slower to catch up with gender dysphoria, haven't they? So
because you've got such a right-wing press that are anti us.
Yeah. We're an unpopular cause, aren't we?
Well, they best, we're not going nowhere, so I hope they get used to us. I'm not going to say we're growing and growing, but the gender dysphoria has been there from day one. If you go back to the time of the Romans, but even before the Romans, homosexuality and gender dysphoria has been there as long as civilization's been there.
Yeah.
But it's always gone through different stages. And, sometimes it was more recognisable. And in some countries where it's not recognisable, it's still practiced. It's still practiced. It's a strange world we live in, yet people are afraid to admit it.
Yeah.
It's... You see some of these countries where, you're stoned to death if you're gay. Yet it goes on so much between the people who would stone the people that come out.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the program on television, the story of Jeremy Thorpe, the Liberal leader that time.
Yeah.
Well, you saw. I mean, you saw him voting against homosexuality, passing the act. Yet he was behind closed doors. Look at what he was doing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, people have got to stop being two-faced. People have got to, gender dysphoria is here. And as soon as people learn to accept it and help people, and the world will be a much, much better place to live in.
Oh, absolutely.
I've gone totally off the subject of my gender issue.
No, that's right. What was the earliest age that you really felt the gender dysphoria and you really felt different?
I felt different from about the age of 3. I felt totally different, but I never knew what it was. It was a matter of just being different, I think. And then at the age of 15 or 16, I read the expose of April Ashley.
Oh yeah.
And when I read that, my eyes just sort of widened, and I related to everything about her growing up to me, how she felt from a young age, how I felt. And I looked at it and I went, my exact words was, shit, this is me. And I saw exactly how the papers destroyed this woman.
She was a real pioneer, wasn't she? But I mean, in those days.
And she was married to a lord.
Yeah.
And how she was a model in Vogue. And I read and I said, I can never ever let the world know I am. At that time, it was sex change, wasn't it? The word gender dysphoria didn't exist.
No.
I would never ever accept to having a sex change. And then the next high profile one I read was about Caroline Crossley, the Bond girl, Chula.
That's right. Yeah.
And then there was I can't remember her name, an army sergeant Scottish Army sergeant. And then I started reading so much about these, be it a postman, be it a fireman, be it there was one, I remember, a pilot. I read about this pilot, and the headlines in the paper was Captain so-and-so has just had the undercar carriage cut off. I was like, and I was thinking, this I could never ever admit to this. You know, I could never ever read about this, about myself in the paper like this.
It must have just been eating away at you, especially being such a high profile person. I mean, it's bad enough when you've got that and you're not famous, but when you've got that and you are famous, the pressure.
Well, I wasn't, you know, when I read April Ashley, I obviously wasn't famous.
No,
I was only a young
you
kid.
weren't then.
But I realised that that day you could be, and then as I said, I started reading more about a post. You know, you read about, no matter what you was, you was crucified in the newspaper because it was a great thing to write about. But the more I became famous, the more terrified I became of ever being exposed, because I just didn't understand how people in my world would understand it. And, you know, you'd go to these boxing conventions, which I attended lots of because I had to, and you'd listen to these macho guys talking about women. And I remember one story which freaked me out. We were sitting there, and I won't say any names, but they were high profile people in the boxing world. And they were like, oh, you know, we had a great night out. And yeah, it was a effing good night out until I got back to the hotel room. So it was like, oh, well, what happened back at the hotel room? Well, that thing, that bird, that thing that I went back with, I put my hands down her knickers, and guess what? She had a meat and two loaves down there. You know, and so there was, what do you think I'd done? I bloody slapped her about and I knocked it out, pervert. And these things would stick in my head.
God, yeah. You
know, and I would think, oh my God, you know, that's me. That could have been me.
Yeah.
And again, it was a situation when I, and that's probably why I quite like living on my own, and I'm quite isolated, because I never ever wanted to put myself in that situation. And a couple of times, you know, when I was transitioning, and this before my story broke, as I say, I'm only 5'2", and I really did blend in, and I never really had a problem. And I got chatted up by a couple of people, a few guys, and they'd asked to take me out for a drink, you know, and I went out, and at the end, I'd always make sure for a meal I would pay half the meal. And so that way they owed me nothing and I owed them nothing. And they suggested, oh, would you like to come back to my hotel or back to my house? You know, I would politely decline, because I would never put myself in that position. You know, because that story always stuck with me.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah.
You know, so you go through this, you know, and I think I still now I don't hide who I am, but you know, I've been out with a couple of guys. One guy I went out on a regular basis for about 3 or 4 months with. I've been out with a couple of women, you know, and they know who I am. It's quite strange, but I am honestly afraid to let someone into my life full time. And I don't know if I think that's just the mechanism that I've built around myself to protect myself.
It could be, couldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's, you know, I have a very nice circle of friends that I socialise with. Yet I don't.
It's a good way of finding out who your true friends are, isn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, you know, and I talk to my daughters, you know, and my daughters always say to me, do you know something, Dad? Remember what you taught us when we were growing up, and we used to talk about boyfriends. You don't need anyone in your life, but you'd like someone in your life. And if the right person walks into your life, you'll know. Yeah. And that's how I deal with it now.
Yeah, same with me. Absolutely. That's exactly how I approach it as well. And what was the general reaction in the boxing community when you came out? Because obviously it was such a testosterone-filled world, and you know, you're coming out there.
Do you know what? It's very hard to say. Some were quite acceptable and sent me nice messages. Some were quite, shall we say, blasé about it. You know, 2 of the high-profile promoters, I saw interviews that they'd done, and it was. I thought, you know what, you're not nice people.
No.
I won't say their names because I don't want to, obviously.
No, that's
but
absolutely.
I mean, there's nothing to go back. The interviews are out there, so if ever they came after and said that I slandered them, no, because I've seen the interview and the interviews are still out there. So it depends. I think it depends on your personality and how you've been brought up, how you behave towards other people with that maybe people see with a difference to what they think is normal. But then I ask myself, what is normal today? There is no what is normal. One of the things about transition that has helped, I see the world totally different to how I did as Frank Maloney. As Frank Maloney, I only saw the world in black and white. There was no grey area. There was no other colours. Thankfully, when I was able to look in the mirror and face myself and be true to myself, I saw the world in so many different colours. And I realised there's a very grey part of that world. And I was a member of that grey part of that world. And they're the people that we should help, because they are the people that are frightened to be their true selves or frightened to come out and talk about themselves. And they live a very unhappy life. Because I was living a very unhappy life, and no doubt you was at one stage.
Yeah. It's funny. For me, it was I wasn't that unhappy for most of it. I had pretty happy life for most of it, but there was always that gender dysphoria there, and I used to consider myself a cross-dresser until a couple of years ago, when my gender dysphoria just went through the roof, and then I didn't know what gender I was at all, and I had to go on a whole journey to discover it. And I was completely unprepared for my gender dysphoria increasing as it did, and since found out that it's actually very common for that to happen, particularly in the late 40s. So I'm quite typical like that. But when that gender dysphoria did increase, my God, that turmoil, it was hell. It was absolute hell. And I was very unhappy then, very unhappy.
I mean, when I say unhappy, I wasn't unhappy in my marriage. I was unhappy that I was lying to myself. And I was lying to the person that I loved. And I was destroying that person's life, and I was destroying my children's life. Because I couldn't show them the love I wanted to give them, because I was frightened that my guard would drop down and something would come through. And it's I don't know. It's we all deal. No one's journey is the same. No one's journey to find their true self is the same.
No, not at all.
The only thing that brings us all together, I think the most common thing in this journey is somewhere along the line we've either thought about it, or we've attempted, or we've done it. Suicide. That is the thing that links all of us trans men or trans women together.
I'm actually one of the lucky ones. I never attempted it, although most of my trans friends have, most of them. So,
but did you ever think about it?
No, I haven't. Actually, I can honestly say I haven't. No, that's but I know it's unusual, because I say most of my trans friends have, and certainly the stats. Well, in fact, actually, the stats actually, I think they're bad, but I think the reality is actually worse than that, because most of my trans friends have thought about it or attempted it. But I'm one of the.
I don't think I'm one of the stats, because I've never filled in a survey.
No.
And I know I attempted it 3 times.
But now, so when you actually came to actually admit to yourself that you were trans, and then actually decided to do something about it, how did that feel?
Scary.
It's a big thing, isn't it?
Worry about what you're going to lose. You worry about being ridiculed. You worry about being isolated from the world. You just worry about everything. You do. And that was why, when I sat down with my daughters and my family, we designed 2 plans, Plan A and Plan B. Plan A was for me to transition very privately and move to Portugal and just live my life. And if anyone asked where I was, our dad's gone away traveling around the world finished with boxing, just wants to do things they never had, you know, but then my children said, but for the rest of our lives, we would have to lie.
It'd be like you'd be on the run, wouldn't it? It'd be like that.
Yeah. And then plan B was, if it ever came out publicly, we would try and deal with it in our own way, and we would try and take control of the issue. Well, we know plan A never worked. Plan B, unfortunately, was forced upon us.
Right.
But we did take control, and we did agree our deal with the press, and we agreed, you know, what the newspaper that I agreed to do my deal with gave us was unheard of. And I think it actually changed the way that people and the press wrote about the transgender community, because it has changed quite. And I've been told it by people that, you know, by the way I came out and I took control of the story.
Best way.
The story couldn't be printed unless it was completely vetted by me, that every terminology was the right word. The word sex change could never be used. Gender dysphoria had to be used, or gender reassignment operation could be used. I had headline approval, and I had picture approval, which has never been given to anyone before.
Wow.
You know, and I handled, I mean, I don't know if you've come across Lucy Clark, the football referee.
Yeah.
That transitioned.
Yeah.
Well, I handled her PR for her, and very much similar situation was done. Right. Because you have to take, if you are in a profile position, or you're in something that someone, you know, because the Sun, they actually, their first headline was so bad that they actually had to pull the paper and reprint their paper, print their headline, because they saw the way the country were going, that were very supportive of mine. Because, you know, obviously my deal was done with the Sunday Mirror, the Mirror Group. And the Mirror Group did, in their first edition, when all papers follow each other, they led with a lost leader. And they didn't do it, and my story didn't come out until the second edition, so no other paper could write about it on the day. So it wasn't until a Monday when all the papers started writing about it.
Right.
And I've actually got a copy of the Sun's headlines here, because obviously it was the first edition, and you know what, the second edition, the headlines was totally different, and the story was slightly worded different, because they saw the support that I was getting, and it was because the journalist that wrote the story was very good. And as I said, the head of my support group that helped me through everything went through it and read everything and made sure all the terminology was right.
Brilliant.
Because the one thing I wanted to do was protect my family, and to protect my own integrity, you know.
Absolutely.
And it worked for me, and you know, I think it has worked. I've advised quite a number of trans people who have had papers come after them, even just to local papers, how it should be, how to deal with it.
Well, I did a similar sort of thing, because although obviously I wasn't as high profile as you, you know, I was fairly well known, and I've been a photographer and filmmaker all my life, and all my working life. And my business was, my photography and video business was, and still is, named after my old male name, which was Martin. It's Martin Neeves Photography and Film. And I felt that when I came out, I didn't want to change the name of the business, because it would be like starting from scratch and nobody would know who I was. So I decided to keep the name of the business the same. In order to do that, I'd have to come out very publicly as being trans. So I made a coming out video, and I sent it to all my clients, and I put it on all my social media. And of course that went big, and it's got picked up in the media and stuff. And I started doing interviews, well, initially with local radio and local newspapers, and then it went national and did national stuff as well. But I just found that by doing that coming out video was just brilliant, because there was no gossip about me. Like I live in a village in Leicestershire, and there was like no gossip about me, because what could people say? They couldn't say anything else that I hadn't said about myself already. And so it was just out there, and it was done, and it was brilliant. There was no problems at all. It was definitely
it was very much like the Olympic swimmer, wasn't it? What's his name when he took out? He's about coming out about being gay. He instead of doing a story of he just put it on his social media account.
Yeah, just whack it out there. And,
Yeah, it's a good way of doing it.
I think.
And once it's out there, there's so much pressure off you as well, because you're not going to have people thinking, "Oh, is that a man or is that a woman?"
Yeah.
Do you know?
You don't have
now
to
when I
hide
go
it.
out, no, I mean a lot of people still refer to me as Frank because
Really?
that's how people remember me. And again, I'm one of these trans people. I don't get worried if people call me Frank, or if someone says, "Oh, you was a man before," you're Frank Maloney. It doesn't bother me. I know it does affect some people, and some people, my daughters were crucified because they still refer to me as Dad. And I saw some of the social media stuff, and one of my daughters got a letter from some, but I've made a point. I am their dad. So if I want to be dad, and to them I'm dad in a dress, and that's it.
Yeah. Well,
I would not.
The same thing,
I would not disrespect their mother by them wanting to call me mum or calling me auntie, because I am not. I'm their dad. And even when we're out there, we can be sitting out having a meal and a drink, and my eldest daughter is very good. She'll just call me Kelly, but in private she'll call me Dad. My two younger daughters still call me Dad because it's a natural habit for them. We can be sitting in a restaurant and they'll go Dad, and people will look over at the table, and it's at first it was quite funny. It was quite, and I remember once taking my young daughter to New York, and we came back, and my story had broken, but obviously not everyone read it, so it was quite good. And we come back, and I use Kellie Maloney a bit like you, for my business and I actually use a different name as my surname for when I travelled, because as I said, I had a plan A and a plan B. So my passport was different to my daughter's. And when we came through the customs, obviously the guy looked at it and he saw my daughter's name and he saw my name, and my daughter at the time was very young. I think she's about 12, 13, I'm not sure, but she looks a lot younger. And he looked at it and he went, "Excuse me, miss, what relation are you to this child?" I went, "Her dad." And he looked at me, looked at my passport, looked at my daughter, and my daughter turned around and went, "Yeah, that is my dad." And the guy his eyes just rolled in his head. And he went, "Oh, I went, "I am her dad, actually." And he just handed the passport. His mouth just stuck. He couldn't even talk.
Oh, good for you. Brilliant. Yeah.
And when my daughter and I, when she went out, she gave me a high five. She went, "I love that." She said, "That is so funny when that happens."
Yeah. I get the same thing happen to me. It's the same sort of thing. And yeah, exactly. But it's lovely. And it's great that your daughters support you, and it's fantastic.
No, I've been very lucky I hear stories about other trans people, male and female, how they've been ridiculed and how they've been disowned. But I have to be honest, I've been very lucky in the support I get, in the love I get from people. I can't, and I don't know, is it because I'm quite honest and open? I'm a very open book. If you ask me a question, I'll answer it. I don't hide. I feel, and as I said, I don't get concerned if I get misgendered. What I get concerned is if the people are rude to me, openly rude to me. Because I think if you're misgendered and it's a genuine mistake, there's nothing. That's fine. And often, sometimes in Portugal here, when I go out, especially if I go into the sort of tourist area in the summer, when my daughter, you might get someone and they'll go, "Oh, Frank, can we talk to you?" My daughter will go, "But you're not Frank." No, I go, just they're not being rude. They've asked nicely. I often get, "You are Frank Maloney, aren't you?" I go, "Well, I was Frank Maloney. I'm actually now Kellie Maloney." And I smile. Yeah. And it wins them over. Yeah. I just feel there's no point in getting aggressive and like saying, no. Do I look like a man? You've known me for that for most of my life. I transitioned very late in life. And I'm probably younger in mind. Well, I am a lot younger in mind than I actually am in age. because you relive. It's being reborn again. You know, I remember something when my counsellor said to me when I finally told her that the lid had come off the Pandora box and this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
She went, "Ooh, what you've got to realise is most of your friends will be retiring in the next few years. They'll probably take up golf, gardening, or sitting there talking about old stories. You are going to be living a total new life and starting your life all over again. You're going to be a child growing up very quickly."
Yeah.
And do you know what? She was so right.
Yeah.
She was so right in what she said.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's helped keep me young.
Yeah. Yeah. But it does feel amazing to be able to live your truth, though, doesn't it? It's just liberating, isn't it? For me, it was just like a whole weight lifting off my shoulders, and it's just like feels like the real me. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, I now, as I said before, I got up in the mirror. I now get up in the mirror and I look at the mirror, and I smile and I just think to myself, God, thank you for giving me another great day in my life.
Oh,
where before I got up and I was always angry and wanted to have, as I said, who could I fight? Who could I go to war with in work ways? I mean, not.
Yes, of course.
But now it's not like that. Now I get up and I think, well, what can I do today? What, and I do. I wake up every morning and I lay there and I say, God, thank you for giving me another day to live as the real me.
Oh, well, that's a nice way to end the interview, I think. So thanks ever so much for talking to me, Kellie, and being part of Cool People. I really do appreciate it. It's been fantastic talking to you. And thanks everyone for watching as well. And please catch up with me on another episode of Cool People, because I've got lots more cool people lined up.